Spencer Rattler has played a lot of great football in Williams-Brice Stadium to this point in the 2023 season, and I think that theme could continue on Saturday night against the Kentucky Wildcats.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Nation, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I am Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and I am also a staff writer for Gamecocks Digest over on SI.com. I thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both wherever you get your audio podcasts daily and also on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more right now as new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. We are now in week 12 of the 2023 college football season. So by this point, we pretty much know what kind of player everybody is. And for Spencer Rattler, we've definitely learned by this point that when he is playing in Williams-Brice versus playing on the road somewhere else away from Columbia, Spencer Rattler is just a much different quarterback. You could also argue that maybe crowd noise helps out in terms of, not being so loud for the offensive line and also just having a bigger sense of comfort playing in front of your home fans. But the splits between home and away games for Spencer Rattler have definitely been stark, which is why it is, in my opinion, a big deal that South Carolina has home field advantage for the final 2 weeks of the regular season. That includes this upcoming matchup against the Kentucky Wildcats on Saturday night, who I think Spencer Rattler could torch to a certain degree because of the way they've played to this point in the season. Now, I talked about this earlier in the week. When you look at the numbers, the Kentucky Wildcats have not fared very well in terms of stopping the pass. The Wildcats are giving up, I believe, around 241 average passing yards per game. That ranks in the bottom 4 of the SEC. And their secondary is a big reason why they've had issues in that aspect. They play a lot of zone coverage. I went back and watched a couple of their games, particularly against Vanderbilt early on in the season. They were playing a ton of zone, which I know the Vanderbilt's wide receiving core is not bad by any means, but, when you're playing zone coverage the majority of the time against Vanderbilt, then that really says a lot when it comes to the kind of confidence or the amount of confidence that you have in your defensive backfield to make plays. And that's just something that, as a football fan, we're not used to seeing that from a Kentucky defense. But it just doesn't seem like they have a whole lot of lockdown corners that can constantly make plays happen on the back end as they have had in years past. So for Spencer Rattler and this offense, the main thing they're going to have to worry about in this game is Kentucky's defensive front, because sure, Kentucky's secondary might not be all that great, but you could definitely make up for that a whole lot more when you've got some dudes up front, and Kentucky does have a couple really good players. The two main ones to watch in this game are J.J. Weaver and Deon Walker. J.J. Weaver is the veteran of this group. He's been at Kentucky for, I believe, 4 or 5 years now. He is one of the better edge defenders in the entire SEC. And Deon Walker, he is, in my opinion, a true sophomore. Not my opinion. I believe it's fact that he's a true sophomore. But he's very athletic, high motor, big guy on the interior, can definitely move some guys around. And the thing I noticed with a lot of these defenders in Kentucky's defensive front is you don't see very many guys loafing around on a particular play. There might not be a single player that, can just beat you on every given down with pass rushing moves, but every single one of those guys, they work as a unit. They work in cohesion, and if they get a sack, usually it happens because 2 to 3 guys basically drove their man back, not just because one guy made a heroic play. So it's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to South Carolina's offensive line, how they've got to play in this contest, because they've got to make sure that they don't have two, three guys at one time, they're just getting absolutely blown up on a given passing play. So if I am Dowell Loggins in this matchup, I'm going to probably call for a good amount of six-man protections where I'm keeping the running back, Mario Anderson Jr., back there. I'm also going to probably call for a lot of seven-man protections as well, because this is a game where you're going to have to lean on Spencer Rattler. And it's not just because of the fact that Kentucky's pass defense has been suspect this season, but it's also because of the fact you've got two scholarship running backs coming into this football game. Mario Anderson Jr., Dontavius Braswell, and that is it. Braswell has literally played in 2 games all season, and one of them was last week against Vanderbilt, because I think they found out pretty quickly after Juju McDowell went down that they were going to need him for the rest of this season. So for South Carolina, you cannot compromise Mario Anderson Jr.'s health. Mario Anderson Jr. has been playing through injury, it seems like, for the last 4 or 5 weeks now. And admittedly, a lot of these guys are probably playing through injury. But you know for sure that Mario Anderson Jr. is playing through injury because of the inherent toll that one takes at the running back position. So for Spencer Rattler, this is going to be another game. I know it sounds like a broken record at this point in the year, but this is a game where South Carolina is going to tell Spencer Rattler, go out there and win this football game for us. And I think Spencer Rattler is going to have his opportunities. The thing that I also noticed with this Kentucky secondary, to go back to them real quick, whether they were in zone coverage or man coverage, I typically found that Vanderbilt's wide receivers, when I watched that game, they had a lot of good one-on-one situations. They had opportunities to really make Kentucky pay for their lack of real solid coverage. They would kind of be in the vicinity, but it wasn't like they were literally glued to the receiver's hip. But the other thing I noticed about that Vanderbilt game is Vanderbilt missed a lot of opportunities because, quite frankly, their quarterback, AJ Swann, that game, he just did not play a good game. He was not reading the field correctly 100% of the time. When he had some one-on-one opportunities, he did not put up the ball where only his receiver could get it. The point is, AJ Swann for Vanderbilt is not Spencer Rattler for South Carolina. Spencer Rattler's got far more arm talent than AJ Swann. He can make off-schedule, off-platform throws. So this is a game where if the offensive line, which has played way better recently when having continuity, they could just give Spencer Rattler time. This is a game where I see Spencer Rattler going for at least 285, more than likely 300 plus once again. And the other thing is, they're going to need to have that in this contest because, as I'll explain in more detail in just a couple moments, South Carolina's defense, while I think that they can get their stops here and there, it's going to be a bit of a tough matchup for them in terms of the strategy, and try to make sure that they do not let old mistakes come back to haunt them once again. I'll explain what those old mistakes were in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has always got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. Now, South Carolina's defense heading into this ball game, they certainly have got to prioritize stopping a particular player on Kentucky's offense, but they've also got to be careful repeating some of the mistakes that they have made from previous matchups against similar opponents. The main guy that South Carolina is going to have to prioritize stopping in this game is running back Ray Davis. Ray Davis has been one of the better running backs in the conference this year. He had an absolutely torrid month of September, I believe, rushing for over 500 yards in just that one calendar month. But since then, Ray Davis has admittedly fallen off a little bit. And you can easily point to the increase in competition as being a big reason why that's been the case. But Ray Davis is still a very, very good running back. This is a guy that has really good contact balance. Shane Beamer mentioned this at his Tuesday press conference. This is not a cat, pun intended, that goes down easily. When you are facing a running back like Ray Davis, you cannot just expect to make one-on-one plays all night long. The emphasis for this defense in this game has got to be everybody has to rally to the ball carrier. Do not expect one guy, even someone as tough as Debo Williams, to always bring down Ray Davis on first contact. You need to treat it like he's going to break one or two tackles before you finally get him down. South Carolina has had their struggles when it comes to tackling in certain games this year. And while, yes, against Vanderbilt, they were a lot better, they had a game against Jacksonville State where they struggled to get guys down to the ground. They had struggles against Florida. And the other thing is, South Carolina, they have also had games where they almost overemphasized stopping the run. And what I mean by that is they were so focused on stopping the ground game for their opponent that it led to big-time explosive passing plays out of play-action concepts. This happened twice this season already against South Carolina. Once when they faced off against the Mississippi State Bulldogs back in week 4, and again when they played against the Florida Gators back in week 7. The similarities are both those games were at home. The main threat in that game was both the running backs, Woody Marks, and then in Florida's case, 2 running backs in Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson. And South Carolina in both of those games did a relatively decent job at stopping the run. But the trade-off was they gave up a lot of big-time passing plays against offenses that, quite frankly, did not really have a lot of dudes that you should have had to worry about in the passing game. Kentucky, however, they've got a solid receiving core. This is a receiving core that legitimately goes 3-4 guys deep in terms of guys that can make a really big play on any given drive. Tavian Robinson, I believe, is their slot receiver, and their 2 outside guys are Dane Key and Barian Brown. Dane Key is kind of like the lanky, I think, possession kind of receiver that can make a bunch of catches in different situations. And Barian Brown, he's kind of probably the best all-around athlete. He is the speedster. He's the guy that can get behind you if you let him do so. And Devin Leary, for as bad as he has played at times this year, it is tough to be a bad quarterback when you've got receivers running open all night long out of play-action passes. So, for the Gamecocks, this secondary has got to ensure in this game that they do not let play-action bite them once again. And that leads into the talk about strategy for the South Carolina's defense. Last week, South Carolina ran a lot of 3-3-5 against the Vanderbilt Commodores, and it wasn't that we had not seen that formation. Obviously, the Gamecocks have been running that formation since the Texas A&M game. The difference was, though, South Carolina, for the majority of that ball game, they stayed in a 3-3-5 formation against the Vanderbilt Commodores. And Liam Cohen, who met with the media up in Lexington, Kentucky, either this morning or last night, he admitted that, it's a bit annoying as a play caller when you have a game like that all of a sudden pops up on your film study, and now you don't know exactly what they're going to bring. I say all that to say this. I definitely think that Clayton White and that defensive coaching staff did what they did against Vanderbilt because, one, I think they felt like they could definitely get away with it against the Commodores. No offense to Vanderbilt, but that's just reality. And 2, to have some gamesmanship, to play some gamesmanship against this Kentucky coaching staff. Now, as good as it was against Vanderbilt, the 3-3-5, in my opinion, is not going to be a formation that this team can all of a sudden use for every down against a team like Kentucky. Here's why. Kentucky's offense is a gap run offense. What I mean by that is you're going to see a lot of pulling. You're going to see a lot of trap blocks. from the guards, sometimes from tight ends. They will sometimes bring one guy, two guys. They lean on that a good amount in their run game. They will use some zone running block schemes as well. But for the most part, it's gap run, power run, downhill, trying to attack a particular gap on the football field. The 3-3-5 is not going to work very well against a gap run offense that usually has a tight end attached in line with the offensive line, sometimes even two, where it's 12 personnel, one running back and two tight ends. So what I think South Carolina needs to do in this game, I think they need to hark back to the Georgia game. In that ball game, we saw South Carolina, for really the only time all season that I can personally recall, use a lot of 3-4 formational alignments against the Bulldogs offense. And while sure, eventually Georgia wore them down because they weren't getting off the field and they ended up winning that football game, South Carolina at least gave themselves a fighting chance after one half to win that game. It was also on the road. It was early in the season, and it was also pouring down rain. None of that's going to be the case on Saturday night. You've now been through almost the entire season. This time you got this kind of matchup at home. I think that South Carolina should run the 3-4 on early downs to account for the running game. And then on third down, the goal needs to be get them in third down, obvious passing situations. Do not let Kentucky get to 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4. Put them in like 3rd and 8 plus more often than not. Make Devin Leary have to beat you. And I can't believe I'm saying that because Devin Leary was one of the most highly touted transfer quarterbacks this past offseason. I thought he was going to have a great year at Kentucky. And again, it's not like he's played bad in every game, but he has certainly not been the addition that I think many suspected he would be when this season began. If you could put Devin Leary in some really bad passing situations, then you can employ that 3-3-5. You can blitz him in a bunch of unique ways. You can also at times decide, you know what, we're going to drop 8 guys back into coverage. Try to make all of your reads through 8 guys. See if you can make the right throw at the right time when the opportunity is there. If you can do that on Saturday night, I think you're in good shape if you are South Carolina's defense. So obviously that is much easier said than done. And the reason why I think this will be a close game is because I do think that South Carolina, to at least a certain degree, is going to get bit once again by play action once or twice. The goal should be, though, again, besides getting Devin Leary in obvious passing situations, do not let play action get you more than once or twice. Against Mississippi State, they got you about 6-7 times on 40-plus yard plays with Tulu Griffin by himself in the slot. Against Florida, they continue to extend drives on third down because of it. Don't let that happen once again against Kentucky. So we'll see if the Gamecocks can manage to do that on Saturday night. Now, despite all of the things that still are sitting on the table for South Carolina, a potential win over your rivals in the Clemson Tigers, the possibility of going to a bowl game in 2023, which just a couple weeks ago did not seem likely. There's also some other headlines that are taking place off the field as certain coaching positions are beginning to open up, and Shane Beamer's name was thrown out there for one of those coaching positions. We're going to talk about the possibility that Shane Beamer could go to Starkville or if he's going to stick around in Columbia in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Again, that is $150 if your money line bet hits. The Carolina Panthers have had a pretty rough season. We talked about that several times on this show. And it's not going to get any easier for them on Sunday afternoon. They'll be taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Charlotte. The Panthers are currently 10.5-point underdogs, which is like being a 24-point underdog in the college game in the NFL. And the money line for the Panthers is set at plus 410. For the Cowboys, it's set at minus 520. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. You may dislike the Cowboys a ton, but there's just no questioning. The Cowboys are going to run away with this game. Don't even think about putting money on the Panthers. Put the money down on the Cowboys if you want to bet on some NFL Sunday action. Now is the best time to join FanDuel because the app is easy to use and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. Now, unfortunately, there are a couple head coaches around the SEC that have been fired from their respective position. It all started with Jimbo Fisher this past Sunday over in College Station at Texas A&M. And then it continued on Monday morning as Zach Arnett was relieved of his duties over at Mississippi State. You could have a whole nother conversation on, whether or not Zach Arnett was given a fair chance with the Bulldogs. He coached there for literally less than one calendar year after the tragic passing of Mike Leach this past December. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the fact that Shane Beamer's name got thrown out there as a potential candidate for Mississippi State not long after the news broke on Monday morning that Zach Arnett had been fired. Now, I had put out a piece on Gamecocks Digest. If you watch, or you read, I should say, some of my written pieces over on Gamecocks Digest at si.com. And I gave my thoughts over there on, whether or not Shane Beamer could actually leave for this job. And here's the thing. If you approach this from a logic standpoint, a connection standpoint, then this news might concern you a little bit because Shane Beamer, he's got deep connections with Mississippi State. For one, he did coach there from 2004 to 2006 under College Football Hall of Famer Sylvester Croom. It was like his first real big-time coaching gig at the collegiate level. He also, met his wife there, Emily Beamer, met her at Mississippi State. That is her alma mater. She's got a lot of family from that area. So obviously, if you were a Mississippi State fan, you would think that that would have to help you a ton throughout this process. And to top it all off, he is really good friends with Mississippi State's athletic director, Zach Selman. So there are a lot of connections and roots that the Beamer family has when it comes to Mississippi State. But despite all of that, in my personal opinion, I do not foresee Shane Beamer going to Mississippi State. One, Shane Beamer has mentioned countless times, and he did it again on Tuesday afternoon at his recent press conference with the media, that this was his dream job, that this is his dream job, that he wanted to be here. Two, Shane Beamer is in year 3 of this building project here at South Carolina. Again, the Gamecocks are not where they want to be. Obviously, they did not envision going into week 12 of the 2023 season having a 4-6 record and having to sweep basically the entire month of November to make it to a bowl game. But no matter what you think the situation is right now at South Carolina, I can promise you it is worse at Mississippi State. Mississippi State, to no fault of their own, no program can ever prepare for their head coach literally passing away within a few days of time. But Mississippi State will not go bowling this year. They are probably about to have a lot of guys leave that program. They already do not recruit anywhere near on the same level as South Carolina does. And to top it all off, you look at their facilities, you look at even their alumni base, their booster base. South Carolina, sure, I get it. They don't excel in either of those areas relative to the rest of the SEC conference. But South Carolina is above Mississippi State in almost every single aspect of their football program. So my point here is the only reason that Shane Beamer would ever leave Columbia for Starkville is if his wife just really badly wanted to go back to Mississippi State, if she wanted to go back home. And I do not possess the belief that that would end up happening. I know, again, how much Shane wanted to come to South Carolina, how much he wants to succeed here, as tough as things have been this season. I don't think that his wife would make him pick up everything and them and the whole family and go all the way to Mississippi State. It would be their third major move as a family in like the last 6 years or so, because they went to Norman, Oklahoma back in 2018. Then they went to Columbia, of course, back in the 2020 offseason. Going to Mississippi State, that would be the second move in 3 years, third move in 5 or 6 years. I don't think that Shane's wife, I don't think the family would want to do something like that. So, in my opinion, the reason why you're seeing Shane Beamer's name thrown out there is because Let's be honest, Jimmy Sexton is at it again. I know that many of you are probably wanting to put a hole through a wall just hearing the name Jimmy Sexton thrown out there right now. But Jimmy Sexton is Shane Beamer's agent. He is the reason Shane Beamer right now makes over $6 million a year as South Carolina's head football coach. And he is doing this because, quite frankly, let's be honest, he's really dang good at his job. Jimmy Sexton knows this game. He knows what to do when it comes to trying to get his clients more money. He is playing the connections game. He is, in this case, playing the wife's connections game when it comes to Shane Beamer's name and Mississippi State. He is trying to see if he can get Ray Tanner and the Board of Trustees to fold and give Shane Beamer more money or an extension. And my thought process on that is, if Ray Tanner and the Board of Trustees believe that Shane Beamer deserves an extension or a raise, that's on them. Personally, I wouldn't say that he's done anything this year to show that he should get that, at least right this moment. That's not to say, of course, that I think that they need to run the rest of his contract. I'm definitely not suggesting that. But I don't think that this is a case where Ray Tanner and this Board of Trustees, they've got to actually worry. I think this is Jimmy Sexton just basically throwing a fishing line out there and slowly reeling it back in and trying to see if he can get a nibble or a massive bite from Tanner and the Board of Trustees when it comes to Shane Beamer's contract. This is the kind of game that gets played every offseason when it comes to the coaching carousel. Certain jobs opening up, whether it's in the SEC or the Big Ten, or if it's a really big name program that maybe isn't in those two conferences right now. So, bottom line, would not worry about the possibility of Shane Beamer leaving for Mississippi State. This is strictly a game being played by Jimmy Sexton. So we'll see if that ends up leading to any changes with Shane Beamer's contract over the next few weeks or next month and a half, however long it takes for Mississippi State to make their eventual hire. But I don't think anything's going to happen as of this moment in time. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. Thank y'all so much for tuning in as always. I want to apologize because I know that I have been really bad recently about the time of these shows coming out. You know, posting a live show early in the morning or doing a live show around lunchtime, 11:30, 12:30. I know that I've been bad about that. That is all on me. Got nothing to point to other than myself. Here's what I will say. Crossover show for tomorrow with Locked On Kentucky's Lance Dahl. We are going to have one this week. And I promise you, it is going to be posted early in the morning. For YouTube, that is 7 a.m. Eastern time. And for audio podcast, plan to have it come out at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, apologies for all of that. I know I have to be better. So, just wanted to tell y'all that before we end today's show. With that bearing in mind, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show right here on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.